I introduced Maryland and how we're going to win on the 3 phases of football this morning to the team, and we're full throttle on Maryland. So still glad we got 2 weeks to prepare, but definitely exciting just, getting to the point now we can talk about hitting somebody else and not going up against each other, just doing something a little bit different. So, now you're getting into your scout team looks and some of your trade looks and some of that stuff. So I was very pleased with today, just the first day of that going on, and looking forward to seeing how we progress this week.
That's a hard time of year because, you do have to make that separation between the 2 deep and then the scouts, and you need to know that the scouts are going to be what makes your team as good as they can possibly do. Have you had a good buy-in with them?
Absolutely. Again, today was really our first day, but we have had what we call the Rabbits on special teams. That's kind of our scout special teams, call them the Rabbits, and they've done a really good job so far for us too. So, we'll have some, I would say incentives is the word, but we also look at effort that those guys show on scout team, and definitely want to, reward those guys with travel squad and suiting up for games and some of those things. And today was a really good day. Again, just first day. Definitely gonna be some stuff to clean up. I think part of it too is just teaching the tempo of what scout team looks like versus what we call a teach period. It's a little bit lighter versus a true scout period, which is full speed, and some of those things, just some small things to work through. But overall, I was very pleased with the scout looks today.
Very good. And then we haven't seen you since the scrimmage. And I know the scrimmage was a lot of the younger guys playing, but was that a good day for you guys as far as evaluating and maybe who will be on scout team and who will move forward?
Absolutely. So we started that, with a couple 2-minute scenarios with the 1s and 2s, and then we pulled those guys. Especially I didn't necessarily pull the 1s or 2s, but the people that have played a lot of college football, played a lot of snaps, have been around the block. We pulled those guys, and then we kept the others out there to kind of roll. And I thought it was really good. I think those guys got about 50-something snaps, the 3s and 4s, and it's probably the most ball they've gotten here, and it was in a live scenario, and so really good. I think we were able to really evaluate some guys and be able to, to push the needle a little bit one way or the other as far as, hey, we're going to give you more reps here, or hey, we're going to push you to scout team. But, I told the team today after practice that travel squad's not official until Thursday of next week, and so I'm watching every play like I always do, and scout and evaluating everything as we go.
I said the last one was the last thing, but it's not. How are you doing with all that you've got to do as a head coach, and then watching film on defense and offense, and kind of learning the ropes of delegating to others?
Yeah, I like to think I'm doing pretty good at it. I think we'll find out on August 30th a little bit more how nerved up I get before the game. But right now it's been smooth. Again, I like to think I don't procrastinate. I like to get in, I like to go, I work, and I get it done, and then that gives me time to be efficient in other areas. And you talked about delegation, and I've got a great staff with me that I can delegate certain things to really help me get through my day. That kind of starts personally for me with my assistant quarterback coach, and Trent Vasey. Does a tremendous job for me, helping me get prepared, doing some extra meetings with the quarterbacks and stuff like that whenever I really need him to be dialed in. And he's a up and coming young phenomenal superstar kind of type guy that'll be in this role soon. And so he's done a great job of really helping me. And then just a lot of the off the field stuff is where the chief of staff and some of those roles come in and really help me take a lot off my plate, which is huge. And that's my chief of staff's job, is to try to keep everything off the field off my plate and kind of let me do as much X's and O's as I can while still understanding the head coach role. But it's been smooth so far, and like I said, we'll see kind of what it looks like once we really get in season.
I wanted to ask, overall, is there a position battle still going on that's you're like, wow, I wish I could bring more than just 2 or 3 of these guys with me. I wish I could have more of the room be able to play than you'll be able to have.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you talk about the inside linebacker room a little bit, and not necessarily like who's your top 4 or 5 guys, but just you got a couple freshmen that are playing special teams for us that are kind of on that cusp of, are we going to make the travel squad for special teams type deal? So that's a room there. We're pretty deep at the defensive tackle position. Running backs one, as far as like true battles. I think we're going to have kind of a 3-headed monster at running back here, but we're also going to ride the hot hand at the same time. And so I don't know if I could go out and say, hey, A, B, or C is the starter game 1. We're just kind of feel that out as we go. But there's been a lot of great competition. Defensive back, the hard part about the defensive back room is those guys, if you can play multiple positions, you play corner and nickel, or you can play safety and nickel, you become more valuable to your team that way too. So But it's been good. Tight end, we're still kind of battling at the tight end position. Wide receivers, we feel like we've got 5 to 6 to 7 deep there that we feel good about, and so we're gonna keep pushing these next week and a half, and we'll go from there.
And we just spoke to Doggett, and he shared that we could expect havoc by the defensive line overall. How confident do you feel in that statement from what you've seen in practice, but also heading into the game prep and then into the game against Maryland?
Yeah, I'm excited. They've done a really, really good job all camp. I'm excited to see them do that against somebody else. You know what I mean? Hopefully, I told them this morning. I'm excited because we can now officially hit the quarterback. And that there's nothing like that. And so I'm hoping that gets those guys juiced up a little bit, that we can hit somebody wearing different colors and an opponent, and more than anything, get after somebody's quarterback. So I feel confident in that. I've seen a lot out of those guys here in through spring ball and through fall camp now. And again, I think that's one of the deepest units, on this football team is that defensive tackle room. So I feel good with where they're at.
When it comes to game prep and heading towards Maryland, what's the mentality you're instilling into just the overall program as you head towards that first game? And has there been any adjustment from what you want to see from the main fall camp practices, or is it more of the same, but now just kind of shifting the focus towards more of a game perspective?
Yeah, I'd say we're more just shifting it to the game perspective. It's kind of interesting for us. Just going into this first game it's a kind of unconventional first game because Maryland's got all 3 brand new coordinators in all 3 phases. Now the special teams coordinator, he's coordinated special teams for a long time. And so we feel pretty confident with what we're going to see there. But, you're looking at their new defensive coordinator. He hadn't called plays since 2016, 2017 in the NFL for the Colts. And so those are really his only 2 years being a true defensive coordinator. He's been more of a defensive line, outside linebackers kind of guy his career. Now he's got a great resume, been around the block a long time, coached a ton of football. So I have no doubt we're gonna have see some really good stuff defensively from them. But as far as being able to say, hey, this is what he's called in the past, this is what it's supposed to look like, we really don't know. And so for us, we feel like we got a good game plan going in, and we're gonna have to clearly adapt as we go, because we really don't know. You got a few snaps in their spring game, but the spring games don't tell you nothing in my opinion. And so we're not gonna just base what we're gonna do off the spring game. And then same thing really offensively. Coach Loxley, great coach, great offensive mind, been doing it for a really long time. He likes to put the ball in the air. And he hired Pep Hamilton to be his offensive coordinator, who's really, really good in the run game. And so, you got to go find some stuff that he's done in his past, marry his run game stuff up with kind of what Coach Loxley wants to do in the pass game, and let's see kind of, what kind of play action pass stuff can they do. And so what we're trying to do is really shift our focus to what are we thinking we're going to get from Maryland. But I don't really believe in like the coach speak type stuff. I'm gonna keep it straight with you here. We don't really know what we're gonna get. And so we've got to do a great job as coaches of giving our guys a good game plan that they're confident and they can go out there and play fast. And as good coaches, we're gonna have to adjust as we go.
And tying into that, with how much roster turnover happens in the portal, especially with a team like Maryland that looks to be very, very young on both sides of the ball, how does that impact the game planning in the sense of, once again, on top of their coaching, you don't really know the specifics of what you're going to see in terms of their roster.
Yeah, exactly. It's tough. Luckily in today's world, you have Pro Football Focus and some of that stuff where you can go pull tape from everybody and all their snaps they played at however many schools they've been before, the year before. So you can try to look at their strengths and their weaknesses. So that's something that's really good in today's world that we have. But again, you're talking like continuity-wise, what's their continuity like? Who is actually going to play for them? We're guessing on their depth chart too of who we believe is going to play for them, and you don't know who's maybe injured, who may be healthy, and so there's so much of a guessing game with the transfer portal, with a team turnover like Maryland, and to be honest, I'm sure they're looking at us thinking the exact same thing. Kind of wondering hey, what are the Owls going to look like on both sides of the ball? You've got me who's thrown it 60 times a game before, and then you've got me who's also had back-to-back 1,500-yard rushers. So what are we going to do on offense? You got a guy in Brett Dewhurst who hasn't called plays yet. So what's his style going to be? So there's really a lot of this going on both sides, and so it's going to be a fun and interesting game for sure.
And I wanted to ask you about the vote on the captains.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the first time talking to you since then. How did that vote go down? And for the guys that now are the captains, was there anything surprising about them being selected, or did you kind of have a feeling going into it that they would be the guys chosen?
No, so what I wanted to do is I didn't want to be the guy. I didn't want to pick the team captains. I don't believe in that because again, I want to have a player-led team, and I think if the players get to pick on who's their captains, I think that's the most empowering thing you can have. And so we just had we had every person on the roster on a piece of paper, and you got to circle 4 names. And I went into it not really thinking, hey, we'll have 4 captains, we'll have 3 captains, we'll have 9 captains. I didn't know. I wanted to just see what the voting looked like. And after the voting came out, there were 7 guys that were clearly ahead of everybody else, and they had a ton of votes. And I just felt like after looking at it, like, hey, all those guys had, over 50% of the team had a vote for them. And so to me, it was a no-brainer to let all 7 of those guys. And those were all guys that when you really do go back and you peel back January workouts, spring football, summer workouts, fall camp, those were all seven dudes that went hard, doing the right stuff. Guys respect them. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for me, after seeing the vote saying, hey, these were kind of some of our leaders coming in this thing anyway, and I wasn't shocked by any means.